I'm Dr. Troost, back again for segment number 9, talking about the same book that we've been discussing previously, Apes or Angels, Darwin, Dover, Human Nature and Race, and its relationship to the new book called The 10,000 Year Explosion by Henry Harpending and Greg Cochran, two anthropologists from the University of Utah, who have done a marvelous job in discussing the genetic basis of a lot of human history, sort of what I call a biohistory book of considerable interest. Both of these books have a segment on a very interesting historical case, the case of the Ashkenazi Jews of Europe. Basically, Ashkenazi refers to German Jews. However, they were spread out over a much larger area than Germany itself, and they are a sort of a case study because they have one quality which is unusual among human beings around the entire globe. They seem to be the smartest people on earth. They have a mean IQ of about 115 compared to 100 for American whites or European whites for that matter, ordinary Europeans. And that's a standard deviation higher, meaning that in the case of America, you take an IQ far above the mean of 100, let's say 145, which is an extremely high IQ, and among Ashkenazis, which are only 3% of America, you will find that 1 out of 70 is above 145. If you look at the Gentile Americans, you find that 1 out of 700 is above 145. And that's a staggering contrast, absolutely staggering. It means that the Ashkenazis in America, for instance, and in Europe for that matter, but in America, wherever there is academic things going on, or entrepreneurial or highly professional things going on, they tend to dominate. They are 20% of the American professoriate. They are certainly dominant on Wall Street. They're dominant in economics intellectually. They are dominant among mathematicians. They're dominant in chess. Half the world's chess champions are Ashkenazi Jews. They have won an inordinate amount of Nobel Prizes in America, partly because they are facilitated by the high technology world and excellent equipment and laboratories and so on. Support systems are there to express their high IQs even better than in some countries. So they are intellectually superior because of their high IQs in a raw biological sense. The question arises, of course, how did they get so smart in the first place? I have written 2 books with Ashkenazi Jews, George Schwartz and Hal Altman, and they were superb people, excellent writers and excellent thinkers. I've been on committees in universities with many of them. First committee meeting at UCLA that I attended was probably 80% Ashkenazi Jew. So their dominance is clear and really inarguable. So we look back at this question, and we have two books essentially treating it the same way, Apes or Angels and the 10,000 Year Explosion, and they discuss them, the Ashkenazi case, basically from the standpoint of the research done by Henry Harpending and his group back in 2005, in which they essentially studied European economic records to try to establish a factor in the socio-biological environment to determine what is acting on the genes for IQ to bring about this superiority over time. the Ashkenazim were in Europe after the beginning in the 9th century, and certainly this development of IQ had to progress over a long period. What the Harpending group found was that they had a unusual combination of cultural traits based mainly on religion and ethnicity, which confined them to occupations related to finance. They were the bankers, the money lenders, the tax collectors for European societies after the 9th century, all the way into roughly 1700. Eventually they were deported to a zone of Pale of Settlement around Poland by Catherine the Great in the 18th century from Russia. So they really did do some migrating around. However, they developed this reputation for incredibly skilled finance in Central Europe, the area around Germany and France, and that sort of evolved along with them, that excellent reputation. They became, at one time or another, superb merchants as well. But the point of the Harpending theory is that while they were confined to this set of related occupations that were very complex, there was an advantage to being smart. And IQ would build up only if the set of factors relating to these occupations were very confining. That is, that they could not intermarry with other people. Now, their religion took care of that. They would not marry other people. So they really kept their genes to themselves, for good or bad. And in this case, gradually a lot of good came out of it, because those that were inferior faded out along the way with much less reproductive success, and they tended to have very large families along the way, and that obviously helped to achieve reproductive success as well. And the success that they achieved certainly disallowed them from engaging in what 95% of the people of Poland and Europe and Russia and Ukraine were involved in. That is peasant farming of the most laborious, backbreaking type. They avoided all of that for the most part, and they tended to be, of course, really materially successful relative to the general population, and therefore were quite well off. However, of course, there was antagonisms with the cultures they were in always. In Russia, they underwent many pogroms. They underwent a massive reduction in numbers through slaughter. In Europe, in 1096, during the First Crusade, the Christian warriors took out about 25% of the Ashkenazim. So they had their bad times and their good times, but the point of it all is that eventually by 1850, Europe generally realized that these people are smarter than average. This became an urban myth in 20th century America, as people under their breath would say that Jews are smarter than other people, and this was truly something that was hush-hush. You didn't speak openly about it. I felt that way from the first time I related to Jewish students. From high school on, Carl Sagan, the great astronomer, was a schoolmate of mine in high school in New Jersey, and walking to school with him even a few times, I didn't do it much, it made me believe that something very special existed in the mind of Carl Sagan. Later on, I met him at UCLA, and he was still an awesome figure, IQ-wise, intellectually, amazing. And so this phenomenon apparently is the result of the natural selection acting through occupational rigors on IQ over time, and natural selection works very well in culture.